Here we go. Okay, I know it's been a couple of weeks since we got to do Mimer because different things have come up, Highland Park, and I went to New York. Anyway, so just to review for a moment, and then we'll go forward. The Mimer we are working off of is based on the Haftorah that we read a couple of weeks ago, that is in conjunction with the Torah reading about the story of the spies. So just a quick review. The Jewish people are getting close to entry into the land of Israel, and they come to Moshe Rabbeinu with a bright idea, and they say it would be judicious and prudent of us to send in some scouts to scout out the land. This feels like a bad idea, but for a variety of reasons, Moshe consents to it. We dedicate our learning to the memory of Bilam Basvar of Abraham. Thank you, Nira, for your very subtle reminder. He decides to sort of hedge his bets, even though it doesn't work, and he handpicks the 12 people, one from each tribe, and 10 of them come back with this very discouraging report, which leads the people to complain, and ultimately Hashem's decree that they will not enter the land. The 40 years of wandering is decreed because of the story of the spies. Now, one of the two, quote, good spies is Moshe's protege and successor, Yehoshua, Joshua. So the Haftorah is the story from the beginning of the book of Joshua. That is, after the Torah ends, the Jewish people are still outside of the land of Israel, the Chumash, the 5 books. Moshe has died, and his protege, Yehoshua, takes over. Well, there's a mourning period for Moshe, and then it's time to move on. It's time to move forward. And Joshua's first act as leader is he sends in spies to the land. So we, the readers, are going, what are you doing, Joshua? This is the same problem that you experienced. You saw, why would you send in spies again? I mean, fool me once, but come on, Joshua, what is your thinking? And fortunately, thank God, these spies do not fall into the same problem that their predecessor spies fall into. And they come back, for executing their mission. So the question that the Mimer addresses is why? Why does Joshua send spies? Why were these spies not taken in with the temptation of disparaging the land like the other spies? And what was the differences? So our investigation begins with the pragmatic. What are some of the differences in the assignment that Joshua gave to his spies? And again, we're not looking here so much for the nuance of the reconnaissance mission, as much as we're looking for the personal life lesson from the spies of Moshe and these 2 spies of Joshua. So one primary distinction is that Moshe sent his spies to spy out the entirety of the land of Israel, which included all of the 7 nations that currently occupy the land. In contrast, Joshua only sent his spies to spy out the 3 nations or tribes that were right there. So these numbers, 7 and 3, right away become an indicator of the difference and thus the key to the success of Joshua's spies in contrast to Moshe's spies. So now we go from the literal story to the metaphor. What is the takeaway? So spying means, the word spying is bad, scouting or inspecting or analyzing is what we all do, hopefully, is we do some self-analysis. We look within ourselves. Maybe we do this before the high holidays. Maybe we do it every evening before we go to bed. And we do a little self-analysis about the understanding of our lives and our day, things that we did well and the things that we did even better than well. Within our lives, we as a neshama, our spiritual construct, is comprised of 2 general categories. We have 3 capacities that are associated with our intellectual relationship with Hashem, which we'll describe in detail as the Mimer unfolds. And we have 7 identifiable characteristics that are associated with our emotional development as people. Now, again, when you're trying to put finite numbers on something that's essentially uncapturable by something so rigid, so it doesn't work out to be 7 absolute defined categories like 7 distinct numbers or 7 distinct colors, but it does have that sense of a blend and a flow. But there are somewhat identifiable characteristics. And we're going to talk about that Joshua's spies or scouts or inspection was, quote, only about the 3 and not about the 7. Now, 3 also registers within our lexicon of the 3 methods through which we express ourselves. And as a general objective, Hashem expresses himself to us and we into the world, to one another, to Hashem, and impact the world. This is our mission. Our mission is to impact the world and make it a more godly place. And that requires us to interface with the world. The most profoundly private aspect of our self-expression is our capacity for conceptual ideas. That is, to formulate a defined thought. The Hebrew word machshava is rooted in the word to give significance, chashuv. So not daydreaming, sort of hazy imagination that's so abstract as to not have any meaning or significance, but really like a person would want to organize their thoughts. That's one way in which we express ourselves, but we're in that context expressing ourselves to ourselves. We're trying to get our mind around it. We're trying to understand ourselves. That's A. Then there is a method through which we interact with one another, and that is our power of speech. And this is the distinctive capacity of human beings. Animals, of course, don't speak. Plants don't speak. Even angels don't really have speech as a form of self-expression. Human beings, our capacity to interact with one another is distinctively through speech. And then ultimately, or additionally, I should say, we have the capacity for activity. And this is how we interact with the world. If we build a bridge, the world can traverse the bridge. They don't have to know who the bridge builder is. They don't have to have a relationship with the bridge. Human beings can cross the bridge. Squirrels can cross the bridge. It is the ultimate interaction with the world and the least personal, because what I'm thinking is absolutely tied into me. What I say is also absolutely tied into me. I have to be speaking it. Even the art that I make, when I finish making it, I walk away. Nobody knows who the artist is. They just see a bridge. They go across the bridge. Or they see the table. They sit at the table. So this is another characteristic or another category that is a 3 that is relevant with Joshua's spies, in contrast to the spies that Moshe sent out, which was to the 7 to do an inspection of our 7 identifiable characteristics. We're going to continue on in the Mimer. We're going to start to see this play itself out. But this is a little background. So the Mimer continues and it says that the land as a whole, which concluded these 7 tribes, nation tribes, this it represents within the person the inspection and the analysis of our 7 innate identifiable characteristics. We've talked about this in other contexts as well. It's based on a verse that's in the book of Chronicles. You'll recognize it because we say it every day in the davening. We also say it when we take the Torah out. And we describe that Hashem interacts with us through identifiable characteristics. The number 7, not random, like the 7 days of creation, 6 and Shabbos. That they are the first, which is limitless giving, like the first day of creation when God created light. It just lit up everything. Then there is orderliness called gevura, to self-restraint. Who is mighty? He who can restrain himself. It's more difficult to restrain myself than it is to conquer a city. That's indicated on the 2nd day of creation when God started to give definition and separation. And you think about this maybe as a parent, as your child. At first, you just shower them with limitless love. But then as they grow older, they need directed love. You got to treat them differently based on what their needs are, what their proclivities are, what their enjoyments are, and so on. This child needs more attention. This child needs more guidance. This child needs more art. This child needs more direction, and so on. And then we have the third day, which is the capacity to blend together, not to be one-dimensional. And that's what brings about harmony and beauty. And that's why on the third day, we sought to see vegetation coming out in the world. Then we have to have endurance. We have to make sure that we stick to it. And that's what we see on the fourth day when God created the sun, the moon, and the stars, that they light up continuously, that it's certainty that the sun will rise tomorrow. And then we have the capacity for glory, not our own glory, but to give glory to others. And this is indicated in the animal kingdom, which give a brilliance and a beauty. And finally, we have the ability to be interconnected with one another, not just to be walking down the street in our own individuated parallel lines, but rather to come together collectively. And then all of that winds up with Shabbos. What you invest is what you get on Shabbos. So these are 7 characteristics that we recognize within ourselves: our limitless giving, our capacity to be infinitely generous and loving, like a parent of a newborn, our capacity to be very directed and very particular in how we interact with others and not treat everybody the same because we're not identical, and our ability to have some flexibility and to interact with one another and with different people differently as is appropriate for them. And then we have our capacity to stick to it even if things don't go our way, and not just to pack up our toys and go home. And our ability to restrain ourselves and let other people, you think about, when a parent has to let their child go off, whether it's to kindergarten or med school, and the parent has to sort of lay back and let the child go out. And then we have our capacity to interconnect with one another and with God himself. And ultimately, all of that comes together in one big package. So these are the 7 characteristics of Hashem, the 7 characteristics that we embody. And this is where Moshe sent his scouts to do the analysis about the character of the land, and by extension or metaphor, the analysis of ourselves. So Joshua sent his scouts that they should only go to the outer rim, the area that's called Jericho, which represents, as we said before, not the internal entity and character of the person, rather their interface, what they consciously think about when they interface with themselves, what they say when they interface with one another, and what they do when they interface with the world. That's what Joshua said. That's where I want you to focus. The lesson learned is it's too much, bit off more than we can chew. Our reach extends our grasp, and all those other metaphors, is what Moshe sent his spies out to do. He said, go and look within yourself and identify the essence of your character. And we start identifying the essence of our character, we can say, oh, I'm hopeless. I'll never truly be kind. I'll never truly be orderly and organized. So Joshua turned around and said, okay, I got a better suggestion. Rather than analyzing whether or not I am a, quote, good person, let me see, how are my interactions? Because quite frankly, if I'm online at the grocery store and I'm in a big hurry, and I say to the person in front of me, would you let me go ahead of you? I'm in a big hurry. And the person says, I'm a very kind person. But will you let me go ahead of you in line? I'm very kind. In fact, I'm writing a book about kindness, but I don't have time to let you go in front of me. I have a PhD in kindness. I don't have. So we're not looking for kind people. We're looking for people who will do kind things. Now, it would be wonderful if our development of our kindness would match our behavioral kindness. So Moshe was saying to his scouts, and to extension to his generation that he was the shepherd of, I'll tell you what, you've been in the wilderness, you've seen the miracles. Has it really transformed you in your innate character? And they said, you know what, it hasn't. I'm still the same selfish, self-centered, impetuous guy that I ever was. So I'm not ready for the land. Joshua said, you know what? I'm not so focused on whether or not you're a good person. I'm much more focused on whether or not you do good things. If I'm going to wait for you to be a good person before you do good things, we're never going to get into the land. But if you're ready to analyze not what you'd like to do, but what in fact you do, not what tickles your fancy, but what in fact you contemplate on, not what you wanted to say to that guy, but what in fact you said, not what you had this overwhelming urge to do, but what you in fact did. If we can get that mastered, we'll get into the land. Yeah, we'll work on it. We should all be nice people, but more importantly, we should all do nice things. And this is what the lesson we learn, because what I consciously think about, not what jumps in my head, but what I consciously think about, what I say and what I do, that's always under my authority. I can always contain that. And therefore, there is an instruction to every single person to do that kind of self-analysis, that kind of reconnaissance mission, to go and analyze, what do I in fact willfully sit and think about? What in fact do I allow to come out of my mouth? And how in fact do I interact with the world, other people, and even with the world, that those should be in compliance with Hashem. In contrast to what is my character, I may not ever be able to develop that. I may not, I remember when I used to talk to the girls in the high school, they were going for their seminary interviews. And anybody who's ever lived through a daughter going through a seminary interview, this is one of the more harrowing moments. It's even more important than who you sit next to on the bus in 4th grade. So they were always terrified they're going to get tripped up with some question. So one of the questions that they would sometimes ask them is, tell us some flaw that you have. So this is a tricky question, because if you say, oh, I have no flaws, so then they're going to dismiss you. If you say, well, I did murder somebody last week, well, then they're not going to accept you. Well, what are you going to do? Nobody ever said that, don't worry. So I suggested to them that they say, I have a tendency to oversleep. So I set my alarm and I always get up on time. So it works because I'm acknowledging my imperfection, but it doesn't manifest itself. So I may be a late sleeper, but I set 3 alarms and I get up on time. So my tendency is what Moshe Rabbeinu said. Moshe Rabbeinu said, go out and become so self-analytical that you will perfect your character. Joshua said, you know what? You may not be able to perfect your character, but you can perfect your behavior. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu, who sent his scouts to go and do an entire self-analysis, the whole land, they failed, because that was something that a Moshe Rabbeinu, in a certain sense, figured they could do. You know, Moshe had that limitation, let's call it, that when you're at Moshe Rabbeinu's level, you figure everyone else can be at your level. I did it. You could do it too. You ever hear people say that? I play the piano. Why don't you play the piano? I don't know. Why don't you run faster? He runs fast. Moshe Rabbeinu could do it. The people couldn't do it. They couldn't transform their character. Joshua said, let's not worry so much about character, and instead, let's be concerned about what you in fact do, about behavior. And that includes internal behavior, about what I willfully sit and think about. And that is within your capacity. That is available to every person. That is a manner in which you can succeed. All right, we'll stop here. Tomorrow night, we'll do some Parsha. Nice to see everybody. I'll send out the recording in a few minutes, or maybe tomorrow, actually. I think I'll send it out tomorrow. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thanks for a great class.
It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.